إن الدين عند الله الإسلام.
وانفعنا بما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه، وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم ارزقنا الإخلاص في القول والعمل. أما بعد, first of all, I would like to mention we apologize for missing yesterday's class. We had no internet out here. Because of quarantine, there's a lot of people that are using the internet, so we had technical difficulties regarding the internet. Wallahu musta'an. But hopefully today we can continue our class. Last week we stopped at Kitab Al-Siyam in the hadith of Zayd ibn Thabit. If you could flip to the next page. Inshallah, let's flip to the next page. All right. The hadith of Zayd ibn Malik, that's narrated by Anas ibn Malik. Zayd ibn Thabit, that's narrated by Anas ibn Malik. And today we'll move on to hadith number 188, in which عائشة رضي الله تعالى عنها عن عائشة رضي الله تعالى عنها وأم سلمة رضي الله تعالى عنهم جميعا أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يدركه الفجر وهو جنوب من أهله ثم يغتسل ويصوم. Aisha and Salama, they both narrate this hadith from the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, and there's a reason why they both narrate it. Let's start off with Salama رضي الله تعالى عنها. Salama, Hind bint Abi Umayyah al-Makhzumiyah radiyallahu ta'ala anha. She was one of the early Muslims. She embraced Islam very early along with her husband. Matter of fact, her and her husband were the first people to migrate to Abyssinia. Her husband Abu Salama was the maternal cousin of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet ﷺ's aunt was Abu Salama's mother. All right, so they were first cousins. So Abu Salama and Salama, they embraced Islam very early, and Salama was the cousin of Abu Jahl, by the way. They both migrated to Abyssinia. Then they returned back to Mecca after hearing rumors that Quraysh accepted Islam. As soon as they arrived in Mecca, they found out that the rumors were baseless. So they went back to Abyssinia a second time. Then they came back to Mecca, and then they migrated to Medina. Although they didn't migrate to Medina together. Abu Salama was separated from his wife because Salama wasn't allowed by her family to go to Medina, but she ended up leaving to go to Medina anyway. She went to Medina, and then Abu Salama ended up passing away in the year 4 after the Hijrah, after a battle. Then, after her iddah, after her period was over, the period of waiting after her husband's death, which is 4 months and 10 days, Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu came to ask her hand for marriage, and she turned Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu down. Then Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu came to ask her for marriage, and she turned him down as well. And then the Prophet ﷺ asked her hand for marriage. And then she was hesitant at first, and then she finally accepted, until she became one of the most famous wives of the Prophet ﷺ. She narrated over 378 ahadith, which is one of the most ahadith narrated if you look at outside of the top 10. She narrated a lot of ahadith. And she was a scholar in hadith and in fiqh. And she was the last al-Mu'mineen, the last wife of the Prophet ﷺ to pass away. They say she passed away in the year 61 after the Hijrah. One of the more notable stories of Salama's life, radiallahu ta'ala anha, Salama, is that during the Treaty of Hudaibiya, when the Treaty of Hudaibiya occurred between the non-Muslims and the Muslims, most of the Sahaba, they didn't like the term that the Prophet ﷺ made with Quraysh. They thought that Quraysh had the upper hand. But the Prophet ﷺ, as will come later on, the Prophet ﷺ had the better conditions. And that is why Surah Al-Fath, the Surah of the Conquest, all right, is not referring to the Fath of Mecca, the conquest of Mecca. Rather, it's referring to the Treaty of Hudaybiya. The scholars, they say that the Treaty of Hudaybiya, that was the true Fath, that was the true conquest. All right, and that surah came down during the night of Hudaybiya. All right. In terms of Salama radiallahu ta'ala, what happened in Hudaybiya? She was with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded all of the believers to shave their heads and to sacrifice their animals and inform them that they'll be returning back to Medina and they'll come for Umrah next year. The Sahabas, they didn't want to disobey the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but you know when you are given a command and you know you have to follow it and you don't like it, you're just very slow in your process. So none of the companions listened to the Prophet ﷺ. In contrast, before, they used to be in a hurry right away. As soon as the Prophet ﷺ said something, they would rush to it. But this time, all of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ were very slow, and it seemed like none of them wanted to move. The Prophet ﷺ came back very disappointed, and Salama radiallahu ta'ala anha, she said to the Prophet ﷺ, "O Prophet of Allah, these people, they will follow you if you do it. Lead by example." So the Prophet ﷺ, he took her advice, and he was the first one to shave his head and sacrifice the animal, and the Sahabas, they followed in pursuit. So this shows how smart Salama radiallahu ta'ala was, how big of a faqih she was. Abu Ishaq al-Shirazi, his book Tabaqat al-Fuqaha, includes her from the fuqaha of the Sahaba, from the jurists of the Sahaba. He mentions 25 of them, and he includes Salama radiallahu ta'ala anha. With regards to Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, we don't need to mention a biography of Aisha. Aisha is greater than for us to give a biography for her. All right? The greatest woman to ever live, arguably. Although there's a khilaf, there's a difference of opinion between the scholars. Who is greater? Aisha or Khadija? Some scholars, they say Khadija is better because she accepted Islam first. She gave birth to 6 of his kids, and so on and so forth. Others, they say Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, because she's the one that preserved the knowledge. She was the one that was with the Prophet ﷺ in Medina, and so on and so forth. Wallahu alam, and Allah knows best. Aisha bint Abdullah ibn Uthman as-Siddiqah bint as-Siddiq. She has many manaqib, she has many virtues. Her kunya is Abdullah. Some scholars, they say that Abdullah, the Prophet ﷺ gave her that kunya after her nephew Abdullah ibn Zubayr. And Abdullah ibn Zubayr's mother was Asma bint Abi Bakr, the sister of Aisha. And this hadith is narrated by Abu Dawood. It's narrated by Abu Dawood, rahimahullah ta'ala, in his book. And others, they say that no, Abdullah came from a miscarriage that Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha had, although the chain of narration for this is weak. The Imam al-Zarkashi, Imam Badruddin al-Zarkashi, rahimahullah ta'ala, he wanted to show the greatness of Aisha's knowledge. So he wrote a book called Al-Ijabah fi mastadrakathu Aisha ala al-Sahaba. All right? He mentions the many times in which Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha corrected the great companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in this book, after mentioning a brief biography of Aisha, he mentions 40 virtues of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. 40 virtues. All right? Then after that, he lists the number of times in which Aisha corrected major companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, starting from Abu Bakr and Umar and Ali and Abu Hurairah and Zayd ibn Thabit, and the list goes on. She corrected them, and Ibn Abbas, so on and so forth. She corrected them, and many of them would come and seek advice from her, radiyallahu ta'ala anha. All right? And the Prophet ﷺ loved her dearly, loved her very, very dearly. The many ahadith, famous hadith of Amr ibn al-As, which the Prophet ﷺ, he thought Amr ibn al-As, the Prophet ﷺ loved him the most because of how much compassion and mercy he showed him. All right? When he asked, who is the most beloved amongst you, the Prophet ﷺ, who do you love the most? He said, Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. Then who? Then he said, Abuha, her father, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anha. They both narrate that the Prophet ﷺ, and speaking of Imam Badruddin al-Zarkashi, who passed away in the year 794 from the 8th century, speaking of him, remember we said that he mentions all of the corrections that Aisha made for the Sahabas. All right, this is one of them. This hadith happens to be one of them. All right, the Prophet ﷺ, كان يدركه الفجر. Fajr used to arrive, وهو جنوب, and he used to be in the state of al-janaba. The state of al-janaba is when semen is ejected. All right, when semen is ejected. من أهله, from his family. وهو جنوب من أهله, and in some of the narrations, وهو جنوب من أهله, in after intercourse. Right? Semen wasn't ejected due to wet dream. All right, which we will get to later. Do prophets even have wet dreams? We'll get to that in a bit, inshallah. But in some of the turuq of the hadith, in some of the narrations, clearly mentions that it was from intercourse. And min ahlihi also shows that it was from intercourse. ثُمَّ يَغْتَسِلُ وَيَصُومُ. Then he washes himself, then he fasts. What is the dilala of this hadith? What does this hadith show? This hadith shows that if you happen to be in the state of al-janaba, we mentioned the state of al-janaba is when semen is ejected, whether through wet dream or intercourse or any other matters. If Fajr comes in and you're still in that state and you haven't taken a shower, is your fasting valid? All right. The majority of the scholars, the overwhelming majority of the scholars from the four madhabs, وَغَيْرِهِمْ, they say that your fasting is valid. Who differed in this issue? Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Abu Hurairah initially, he said, all right, he said, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said that you have to take a shower before fasting comes in. Now Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu was corrected by Aisha and Salama. That's why they both narrate from the Prophet. And who would know these issues the most? Aisha and Salama. Because the Prophet would have his matters with Aisha and Salama. So they know best, more than Abu Hurairah. And that's why the scholars, they say Abu Hurairah retracted his statement. He went back on his statement. All right? So some scholars, they say that this has turned into an ijma'. This has turned into a consensus. But there's an issue that the scholars of Usul al-Fiqh discuss, and that is, can a ijma', all right, come after a khilaf? Can a consensus be followed by a difference? Like the scholars, they differ into two different opinions. Then they later, basically unanimously agree to one opinion. After the difference of opinion, is it still considered a unanimous consent? What's the big deal about this? The big deal about it is that al-ijma' is considered a dalil. If the scholars agree with something, all right, that is a dalil. Like the Quran and the Sunnah. That is the third strongest evidence after the Quran and the Sunnah. All right? So that's an issue the scholars discuss. So Abu Hurairah earlier on, he used to say, hey, you have to take a shower. If you happen to wake up or Fajr comes in and you're still in the state of Janaba, your fasting is invalid. Wallahu a'lam. طبعا, do prophets have wet dreams? All right. The scholars have differed. Some scholars, they say the prophets do not have wet dreams. Why? Because wet dreams can only come from shaitan. Wallahu a'lam. And Allah knows best what is the mustanad for this, what is the dalil for this. But what other scholars, they say, the second opinion, is that prophets have wet dreams like all regular human beings. Okay? And it really goes back to what is the cause, what is the reason for a wet dream? Why does a wet dream occur? All right? If the wet dream occurs for natural reasons, then obviously the Prophet ﷺ does everything naturally like a regular human being. Wallahu a'lam. All right? And either way, this hadith, as we said, in some of its chain, and in this hadith, its dilala, some of the evidences point towards that this was from intercourse. All right? An issue that is very similar to this issue, and that is a woman who's on her menstruation. All right? Let's say she becomes tahir, she becomes pure right before Fajr. Let's say she becomes pure right before Fajr. All right? and she doesn't end up taking a shower, is that psalm for that day, is the fasting for that day valid, or does she have to make it up? We know it's obligatory for her to fast because she became pure before Fajr. Now it's obligatory for her to fast. But she didn't take a shower, all right? But the overwhelming majority of scholars, they say she has to take a shower. She has to take a shower. If she can't, then fasting is still obligatory on her and she doesn't have to make it up. Whether she delayed the shower intentionally or unintentionally or out of forgetfulness, whatever it may be, the fasting for that day counts and she has to fast on that day. Wallahu a'lam, wallahu a'lam. And I'd like to point out a reminder from the previous hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We mentioned this really quickly and we'll touch upon it again. And that is fasting, all right? Early in Islam, fasting was very difficult. It wasn't easy. Fasting, the way they used to fast is the Sahabas and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, obviously, if you fast or if you sleep after Maghrib or after Isha, all right, you're not allowed to eat. So let's say you take a little nap right before Maghrib. Maghrib time comes in, bam, you go to sleep. You're not allowed to break your fast. All right? It has also been narrated that early in Islam, once Isha comes in, you start fasting then. So there's two narrations. One narration that says, if you go to sleep, you're not allowed to what? You're not allowed to eat or do anything else. All right? So it's been narrated from some of the Sahaba, it's been narrated that Umar al-Khattab and some of the Ansar, that they went to their wives after Maghrib. They ate after Maghrib, all right? And it started to become difficult. Even in one of the narrations, a man one day after Maghrib time, he asked his wife, is there any food to eat? His wife said, there's no food to eat. So she said, I'm going to go grab something real quick. So while he was working all day, he was working since Fajr, so from dawn till now. So while he was waiting, he's like, let me just chill, let me just rest a little bit. And then all of a sudden, sleep overtook him. And then his wife came back and found him sleeping. And then it was too late. He can't eat. She brought him food. Now he can't eat the food. So he had to sleep hungry. He woke up the next day. He had to work hungry in the hot sun with no food to eat. They say in the middle of the day, he fainted. And then that's when قول الله عز وجل أحل لكم ليلة الصيام الرفث إلى نسائكم كن لباس لكم وأنتم لباس لهن علم الله أنكم كنتم تختانون أنفسكم فتاب عليكم وعفى عنكم فالآن باشروهن. All right, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in this ayah that it is halal for you to now to go to your wives, all right, to have intercourse with your wives, and now the time has been extended till Fajr. فكلوا واشربوا حتى يتبين لكم الخيط الأبيض من الخيط الأسود من الفجر ثم أتموا الصيام إلى الليل. Now you're allowed to continue your fast or to continue your iftar until Fajr, and then after Fajr you have to fast. So it was a relief for the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. And they say that one of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, he misunderstood the ayah. All right, so he brought two ropes or two lines of ropes, right? One was dark and one was white, and he was trying to see which when both of them become clear, and then that's when the deadline is. He took by the zahir of the ayah. He took it literally. He didn't take it metaphorically, figuratively. He took it literally. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala literally meant when the dawn comes, when dawn arrives. Allahu alam. That's the story that they mentioned regarding this ayah. The point is, you're allowed to have relations with your wife, all right, from after Maghrib till up until Fajr, all right, till up until Fajr. And even if you don't take a shower, although it's best to take a shower, your Sawm is still valid. And it's been narrated that Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, sometimes he would break his fast by going to his wife. This hadith has been graded as Hasan by Imam al-Haythami rahimahullah ta'ala, and Allah knows best. This has been narrated from Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, showing that it is allowed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, and at the same time, you don't have to take a shower because of the hadith of Aisha and سلمة رضي الله تعالى عنهم جميعا. The next hadith عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من نسي وهو صائم فأكل أو شرب فليتم صومه فإنما أطعمه الله وسقاه. Abu Hurairah, we previously already discussed his tarjama, all right, his biography. We said that Abu Hurairah narrates that the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever forgets while fasting, he eats or drinks while fasting, then let him complete his fast. Let him complete his fast. فَإِنَّمَا أَطْعَمَهُ اللَّهُ وَسَقَاهُ. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that provided the food to him. All right? And in some of the narrations of Imam al-Tirmidhi rahimahullah, huwa rizqur razaqahu Allah. It is a rizq, a provision that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him. All right? And based on this hadith, the scholars have differed. Is the person required to make up that day in terms of his fasting? All right? Like if you go and, this happens obviously on the first couple of days of Ramadan, right? If you go and you accidentally, eat food or drink, all right? And then you realize, all right, do you have to make up that day or do you not? All right? Now, majority of the scholars, they obviously say you don't have to make up that day. This is what the majority of scholars say. And then Imam Malik, rahimahullah, the official position of the Maliki school is that you do have to make up that day. And what the hadith is referring to is that you are not in sin. Because you didn't do it intentionally, you're not in sin. All right? And Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala, the reason why he said this, he said it goes against the pillars. One of the pillars of fasting is to stay away from that which breaks your fast. And this clearly breaks your fast. Whether it happened intentionally or unintentionally, doesn't matter. All right? It's kind of like salah. If you're missing one of the pillars, your salah is invalid, whether it's out of forgetfulness or not. All right? So Imam Malik, rahimahullah, although this from a logic perspective, from a qiyas perspective, it makes sense, but the hadith is very clear. All right? فَلْيُتِمَّ صَوْمَ, the Prophet says. Let him complete his fast. What's the point of completing his fast if it's not counted? فَلْيُتِمَّ صَوْمَ shows that his sawm is actually counted. Now, within the Shafi'i school of thought, there is a niza', there's a difference of opinion. And that is, if he eats a lot, if he eats a whole meal, for example, all right, or he goes to a restaurant and actually eats and sits down. And I've seen it happen to some brothers, man. They come together and they go to a restaurant or they go somewhere, they start eating on lunch break at work or something. And then they realize it was Ramadan, we can't be doing this, all right? And Imam al-Rafi'i, rahimahullah, one of the two sheikhs of the Shafi'i madhab, he says, that sawm is batil. If it's a lot of food, that sawm is batil. And Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah, who's the second sheikh of the madhab, he says, no. It's still allowed because the Prophet ﷺ did not differentiate between little food or a lot of food. All right? Allahu a'lam, and Allah knows best. All right? But what looks to be more correct is the opinion of Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah, because the Prophet ﷺ did not differentiate. So even if you're eating a whole meal and you're grubbing, and you don't realize it, obviously, it's between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if you truly forgot. Okay? If you truly forgot, it's between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you honestly forgot and you don't know and you just started eating, then you can complete your fast. And that food, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it to you as a provision. Now the question lies, if you see somebody eating or drinking, and that person is a Muslim, should you stop them? All right? Should you stop them? Is it from forbidding evil to stop them? Or is this a rizq that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them? Allahu a'lam, Allah knows best, but it really goes case by case. I'd say it goes case by case. You got to look at the person. If you know the person to be of somebody who's upon righteousness, somebody who's upon Allah musta'an, who would fast, and you know that he honestly forgot, then let him continue. And then remind him afterwards, because obviously he's not doing it. But if you know somebody's playing around and he's not serious, he's not trying to fast, then obviously you should go and you should try to tell him, all right, hey, it's Ramadan, you shouldn't be doing this, all right? Allahu a'lam, and Allah knows best. Min babi inkar al-munkar, and stopping or forbidding the evil. The next hadith is a long hadith, a story that occurred to a man. Inshallah, I'll read it in Arabic and I'll translate it in English side by side, and we'll take some of the ahkam. There are 6 issues regarding this issue, so please bear with us. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه قال بينما نحن جلوس عند النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إذ جاءه رجل فقال يا رسول الله هلكت فقال ما لك قال وقعت على امرأتي في رمضان وأنا صائم وفي رواية أصبت أهلي في رمضان. So Abu Hurairah, he says, I was with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. بينما نحن جلوس, I'm sitting down with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because Abu Hurairah, like we mentioned, he used to hang around the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam a lot. He used to live in the masjid of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He lived with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for only 4 years, so he was around the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at all times. And later on, years after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's death, people started saying, yo, Abu Hurairah, where is he getting all these hadiths from? And Abu Hurairah had to make a public statement, and he said, listen guys, all right, you guys keep saying أكثرت يا أبا هريرة. Oh, Abu Hurairah, you have too much hadiths that you're narrating. Where are you getting all this from? ولولا آيتان من كتاب الله تعالى. If it weren't for 2 ayahs in the Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, لما حدثتكم بشيء, I would not have narrated any hadiths. All right? إن الذين يكتبون ما أنزلنا من البينات والهدى من بعد ما بيناه للناس في الكتاب أولئك يلعنهم الله ويلعنهم اللاعنون إلا الذين تابوا وأصلحوا وبينوا فأولئك أتوب عليهم وأنا التواب الرحيم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says that those who conceal knowledge, conceal what has been revealed, all right, indeed awaits them a severe punishment. All right? And they say, keep tamanul ilm, concealing knowledge is a major sin. Allahu a'lam. But in some of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, it shows that it is kufr. All right? It is kufr, it's a form of kufr. Not major kufr, minor kufr. Unless sometimes concealment of knowledge, if it's for the public interest or the public benefit, then that's not a problem. All right? Concealing knowledge for the public benefit because it might be a fitna, it might lead to a bigger harm, then that's allowed. But outside of that, you cannot allow to conceal knowledge no matter what. The Prophet ﷺ says, "Man katama ilman uljim bi rijab min nar." And he's narrated by Tirmidhi. That whoever conceals knowledge will be thrown into hellfire. All right? And then Abu Hurairah, he says, all right, إخواني من المهاجرين. My friends from Muhajirin, they were busy in the markets, buying and selling. وإخواني من الأنصار, all right, they were busy with what? They were busy with farms and farming and so on and so forth. And I would stick with the Prophet ﷺ with an empty stomach. I had nothing to my name, 0. I was broke, but I would be with the Prophet ﷺ. And this is a hadith showing that he was with the Prophet ﷺ. So in this hadith, he's with the Prophet ﷺ, and a man came to him. All right? And who was that man? That man, his name was Salama ibn Sakhr al-Bayadi. All right? His name was, remember this name, Ikhwani, Salama ibn Sakhr al-Bayadi. And in some narrations, they say his name was Salman al-Bayadi. All right? And Abu Umar ibn Abd al-Barr, the great scholar from the 5th century, passed away in the year 463, he mentions that the only companions of the Prophet ﷺ with the name of Salman are 2. Only 2 companions of the Prophet ﷺ had the name Salman. All right? The first one is Salman al-Farisi, and the second one is Salman al-Dabbi. And the third one, he says, possibly this guy right here, this guy, because this guy, his story is very famous. But his original name is Salama, and in some narrations, they say his name is Salman. Allahu Alam. And Muhammad, this man, he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, oh, Prophet of Allah, I've destroyed myself. I'm done for. So the Prophet ﷺ, he's like, what, Malik, what happened? So he said, وَقَعْتُ عَلَى امْرَأَتِي فِي رَمَضَانِ. I had relations and intercourse with my wife in Ramadan. وَأَنَا صَائِمٌ, and I'm fasting. What do I do? So the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't go, he didn't get mad at him, he didn't, zajr on him. He did not do that. All right? What did the Prophet ﷺ do? What did he say? Calmly said, هَلْ تَجِدُ رَقَبَةً تُعْتِقُهَا. Do you have a animal in which you can sacrifice? All right? A sheep that you can sacrifice? So the man, he said, لا, I don't have. So the Prophet ﷺ said, فَلَا تَسْتَطِيعَ أَن تَصُومَ شَهْرَيْنِ مُتَتَابِعِينَ. Are you able to fast 2 months in a row? All right, let's flip the page, inshallah. 2 months in a row, 2 consecutive months in a row. All right. The man, he said, no. All right, can we flip the page, inshallah? Naam. Still waiting for you to flip the page, inshallah. All right. So basically, he said, la. And in some of the narrations, it says that, hey, listen, I could barely hold on to this day. Like today, I could barely hold on. Imagine, 2 months in a row. Like I made a mistake today. I had intercourse with my wife because I couldn't, with my wife because I couldn't control myself. Do you think I could do it for 2 months in a row? لا أبدا. فهل تجد إطعام 60 مسكينا? Can you find 60 masakin in which you could give them food to expiate your sin? So he said no. So the Prophet ﷺ was quiet. And while he was quiet and he was sitting and they were waiting, all right? فبينما نحن على ذلك أتي النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بعرق فيه تمر. Came to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. A man came to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم with a عرق of tamar. What is عرق? عرق is a basket of dates. All right, and that basket, the weight of it is about 15 sa's. All right, what is 15 sa's? 15 sa's is a measurement that they used to use in the Prophet ﷺ's time. It is said that the Prophet ﷺ would take a shower in 1 sa'. And 1 sa' is about 3 kilos. 3 kilos of water the Prophet ﷺ used to take a shower with, which is today, I don't think anybody does that. And they say he used to make wudu with 1 mud, which is 1/4 of a sa', which is probably around a half kilo, all right, or just above a half kilo, 0.6, 0.7 kilos, all right, which is nothing. All right, that's as much as this water bottle right here. Imagine making wudu with this water bottle, right? Subhanallah. Anyways, they say that araq is about 15 sa's. So 15 sa's, I mean, give or take, you're talking about 40 to 45 kilograms, right? 40 to 45 kilograms, around there, all right? Around 40 to 45 kilograms, okay? So he comes in with a lot of dates. That's a lot of dates. So the Prophet ﷺ, he asked, where's the man who was asking the question? So the man, he says, I am. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, خُذْ هَذَا وَتَصَدَّقْ بِهِ. He said, go and give this some sadaqah. So the man, he says, hold on. The guy is a poor man. He has nothing to his name, right? He says, على أفقر مني يا رسول الله. فوالله ما بين لابتيها يريد الحرتين أهل بيت أفقر من أهل بيتي. O Prophet of Allah, to a family that is poorer than us, by Allah, there is no family between labatayha. Labatayha is between the two. They're not mountains, but they're regions with many pebbles and stones, right? Medina has 2 regions, one in the east and one in the west that covers. And that's why during the Battle of the Trench, these 2 regions was covered. Some of the city was covered by mountains and the rest was covered by a trench. So nobody could come through. Anyways, he says, there's nobody in this entire city that is poorer or broker than I am. So who am I going to give it to sadaqah? If anything, give it to me. So the Prophet ﷺ started dying, laughing. حَتَّى بَدَتْ أَنْيَابُ, until his teeth started showing. All right, it shows you that the Prophet ﷺ used to laugh. Now, some might say, okay, what about the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in which he used to laugh by smiling? All right, the scholars, they do tawjih of this. They do tawjih of this by saying that majority of the time he used to laugh by smiling. But there might be sometimes he might laugh more than usual and his teeth would show it, so on and so forth. ثم قال, and the Prophet ﷺ, he said, give it to your family. All right? Give it to your family. All right? So, this hadith is a great hadith. This hadith is a great hadith. And Imam Zainuddin al-Iraqi, rahimahullah ta'ala, passed away in year 806. The Sheikh of Ibn Hajar, Sahib al-Alfiyat, he has an entire book on the explanation of this hadith, and he derives from this hadith 1,000 issues and benefits. 1,000. And it's mutawassat, intermediate in terms of its length. All right, Imam al-Iraqi. That's how great this hadith is. And inshallah, we'll end today's class with mentioning 6 issues that we can derive from this hadith. All right. The first issue is that whoever has relations with his wife or intercourse with his wife intentionally, all right, according to the majority of scholars, it is incumbent upon them to expiate their sin. So they have to what? They have to make up that day, and also they have to expiate that day's sin. If you drink intentionally, if you eat intentionally, when I say drink, I'm not talking about drink as in khamr, I'm talking about drinking anything, water, milk, tea, whatever it may be. If you drink or eat intentionally, there's no expiation for that. You have intercourse, there's expiation for it. And as the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned it to this man. This is according to the majority, overwhelming majority of the scholars. لم يخالف في ذلك. They say nobody has different witness except Imam Abir al-Sha'bi rahimahullah ta'ala from the Tabi'een. It's possible that this hadith didn't reach him, or he did ta'weel of this hadith interpretation, but the hadith is very clear in that. That is the first issue. So majority of the scholars, they require for a person who has intercourse, keyword intentionally, they must expiate the sin. Okay, the second issue, all right, is this expiation, all right, how is it? Do you have a choice between one of the three, or do you have to do it in this order? Sacrifice an animal if you can't, or did I say sacrifice an animal? No, I didn't mean sacrifice an animal. I meant freeing a slave, all right? Rather, sacrificing an animal came by the narration of Ata, rahimahullah ta'ala, and that is a weak narration. So when we say i'tiq raqaba, we mean freeing a slave, all right? All right? Wallahu a'lam. So is it ala takhyir or ala tartib? Is it like in order, or do you have a choice between one of the three? So with the overwhelming majority of the scholars, they say that you have to do it in order. So you have to free a slave. If you can't, 2 months. If you can't, all right, then you have to feed 60 poor people. Now there's no slaves. You cannot free a slave, all right? Today, there are no slaves. You can't free a slave. So the first option would be 60 days, back to back, 2 months, consecutive. You miss 1 day, or you messed up on 1 day, you got to start the 60 days over again. SubhanAllah. If you're not able to do that, then that's when you feed 60 people. All right, that's when you feed 64 people. All right. This is what the majority of the scholars they say, and the Malikis and some of the narrations of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, based on the hadith of Abu Hurairah, they say you can choose one of the three. In this hadith of Abu Hurairah, it mentions that another man came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he said either free a slave, feed 64 people, or fast 2 consecutive months. All right. But when you look at both hadiths, when you combine them, all right, you have one that says you have a choice, and one that says that it's in order. The one that is in order is more detailed, is more specific. So this is why the Jumhur, the majority of scholars, they've taken by this hadith. Wallahu a'lam, and Allah knows best. That is the second issue. All right. Allahu a'lam. The third issue is, do you have to make up the fast? And as we mentioned previously, you do have to make up the fast according to the majority of the scholars. So not only do you have to expiate your sin, you have to make up the fast. All right. This is according to the majority. And some scholars, they say you only have to expiate, you don't have to make up the day. You continue your fast, which is a very strange issue, because if you're expiating, then obviously you have to make it up. Because expiation is something even worse. Because if you eat and you drink intentionally, then you have to make up your fast. All right, and you don't have to expiate. So if you have intercourse, then obviously you have to make up that day. And it's been narrated in some of the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ did order a man to make up that day, although these hadith are weak. Wallahu a'lam, and Allah knows best. That is the third issue. The fourth issue is, if you're not able to do any of the three, does that mean you don't have to expiate? Like this man, in the case of this man? All right, this is a heavy debate between the scholars, okay? First of all, who said that this man didn't even have to expiate? The Prophet ﷺ, he didn't say don't expiate. If you look in the middle of the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said sakat. All right? Sakat. He was quiet. He was quiet for a while. Okay? So that means that the Prophet ﷺ didn't say that his expiation is over. No. Matter of fact, probably what is meant is that the Prophet ﷺ said, okay, until you get some money, or until you're able to expiate, you're off the hook. All right? And even the basket of dates, all right, that the Prophet ﷺ gave him, would that be enough to cover 60 masakin? Did the Prophet ﷺ say that this is the expiation? All right, the Prophet ﷺ ended up giving it to him. And because of this, the majority of the scholars, they say, even if you're not able to, it's still incumbent and obligatory upon you when you become financially stable or when you are able to either fast 2 months or feed the 60 poor people. Allahu alam, and Allah knows best. And Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, he disagrees, and it is one of the two opinions in the Shafi'i madhab. But the correct opinion in the Shafi'i madhab is that it cannot be. You still have to expiate, even if it's tough on you. That is the fourth issue. The fifth issue is your spouse, your wife, for example. The Prophet ﷺ never discussed this man's wife. Does she have to expiate? Does she have to make up that day? All right? Okay? What the majority of the scholars, they say, is that she doesn't have to make up that day if she didn't have the choice to, if it wasn't her choice. But if she was willing to, or if she was the one behind it, then obviously she has to make it and she has to expiate. All right? Indifferent to the Shafi'i school of thought. All right? So if the woman or the husband, it doesn't really matter, whichever, you can flip it any way you want. All right? If she was consensual in having a relation, then they both have to expiate and they both have to, right? They both have to make up their fast. Wallahu a'lam. That is the fifth issue. And the sixth issue is a very simple issue. And I'm mentioning 6 out of many issues that the scholar mentions. I think these 6 are the most important ones. And that is, if you have to feed the poor, how many poor people do you have to feed? All right? Obviously, the Prophet ﷺ, he clearly mentions in this hadith, you have to feed 60 people. All right? So minimum 60 people that you have to feed. This is the opinion of the majority. Wallahu alam. The Hanafis, they say, no, you don't have to feed 60 people. You only have to feed one person. And some scholars like Imam al-Hasan al-Basri, he says you have to feed 40 people. But both of these opinions don't have any evidences for this. And this evidence in this hadith is very clear. And it is the opinion of the overwhelming majority. Wallahu alam, and Allah knows best. Some side benefits regarding this hadith. Look at the adab and akhlaq of the Prophet ﷺ, the way he dealt with this man in this generous manner. All right. Another benefit is that look how the Prophet ﷺ believed in this man. So if you cannot, for example, you don't have to provide evidence because you can't fast 2 consecutive months. So if the judge, you go up to him and you say, I can't fast 2 consecutive months, you don't have to provide evidence for it. You don't have to bring a letter from the doctor or anything. You don't have to do that. He just has to take it. And a famous story happened in Andalusia when the Khalifa there at the time, by the name of Abdul Rahman ibn Muawiyah ibn Hisham ibn Abdul Malik ibn Marwan ibn Hakam ibn al-As Umayyah, from the Umayyad Empire, and he's the one who revived the Umayyad Empire in the West. In Andalusia, he had intercourse with his wife, all right, or a slave girl, whatever it may be. He had intercourse. And then he came up to the scholar Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi, one of the students of Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala, and asked him, what should I do? So Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi gave a famous fatwa in which the scholars criticized him for. And that is, he said, you have to fast 2 months in a row. So when they asked Yahya ibn Yahya, why did you give this hukum? Why did you give this ruling? The first thing is that he has to free a slave. So Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi, rahimahullah, he said, this Khalifa has like 200 slaves, 300 slaves. If he frees one slave, that's not going to even bother him. It says, like, he's going to do it over and over again. It's like, yo, I'm going to do my thing. I'm just going to free a slave. So I'm going to give him the harder punishment. But Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi was criticized by his fellow Maliki scholars, among other scholars, because this is not about, this is the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? This is the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're not allowed to do this. So even if it's easy for him, that's not the point. The point is for him to expiate. And that person does not fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he does not fear the limits and the hudud of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he'll face his abode of the day of judgment. But we have to, you have to give the fatwa, the verdict, based on how it is, based on the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. This shows that the person doesn't have to provide evidence because if he's incapable of doing something. We also mentioned that in some of the narrations of Ata, instead of freeing a slave, it mentions free an animal or sacrifice an animal. And we also mentioned that this is da'if. All right. We will stop there, inshallah ta'ala, for today's class. Bidnillah Azza wa Jal. And next week and next class, we will continue with Babu Sawmi fi Safar. All right. Traveling while fasting, is that allowed? Is that recommended? All right. We'll stop there. Let's see some of the questions, inshallah. All right. Yeah, some people are, I don't know what they're doing on the chat. I don't know what they're writing on the chat, but we have problems on the chat. All right. I didn't understand about wondering rather than fasting about if I have a wet dream after I pray for just my fasting about it. Let's say I wake up by 5 minutes from the day that goes up and I don't take listen until I 5 minutes from the day. No. If you have, the question is, does wet dream render your fast being invalid? No. All right. Wet dreams, if you have a wet dream and you don't take a shower, your fast is valid. Matter of fact, there's an ijma', there's a consensus upon this. Al-Imam al-Mawardi, rahimahullah, scholar from the 5th century, passed in the year 450. In his book Al-Hawi, he mentions that it is a ijma', consensus, that all of the scholars agree that if you have a wet dream and you do not take a shower, your fasting is valid. It's the complete opposite. You said if you sleep after Maghrib, you're not allowed to break your fast. Was that the hadith you mentioned? This is early on in Islam, and then this was abrogated. This was early on in Islam. This was abrogated by the ayah, أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ لَيْلَةَ الصِّيَامِ الرَّفَثُ إِلَى نِسَائِكُمْ. What were the two names of the companions named Salman? The first one is Salman al-Farisi, and the second one is Salman ibn Amir al-Dabbi. Ibn Abd al-Marr, he mentions these are the only two companions by the name of Salman. So to all the Salmans out there, memorize this. And obviously, a third one that they mention is the man of this story, Salama al-Bayadi. Some of them, they say his name was Salman. Until Hajj doesn't happen, is there a base for this? And has Hajj ever not been performed? Some, they say that Qiyam won't happen until Hajj doesn't happen. Allahu A'lam, but they do say that a man from Ethiopia will destroy the Kaaba before the end of times. What was the 4 benefits from Hadith? Inshallah, refer back to the recording if you can, due to time. There are du'as that give the reward for freeing slaves. No. There are du'as that give the reward for freeing a slave. Does that suffice as freeing a slave? No, it does not suffice as freeing a slave. Does it matter what time a woman who finishes her menses showers? Is there like a time frame? Yes, before the next prayer. Before the prayer in which the enter, try to take a shower before that. Can you repeat the second benefit of the hadith? Inshallah, report. If you guys can record back to the. What was the name of the companion who had intercourse during Ramadan? His name is Salama al-Bayadi. Salama ibn Sakhr al-Bayadi. It's also said that his name was Salman. All right. What is the ruling on injections and fluids for one who's fasting? The impact of intention on invalidating the fast. If it reaches your stomach or your nose or any part of that, then it is not allowed. Allahu A'lam. And there's a detailed list for the different types of injections. Wallahu A'lam. Some of them break your fast and some of them don't. If you see someone fasting but forgetting to start eating, is there a ruling on whether you stop them or let them since Allah is feeding them? Like I said, it goes case by case. Wallahu A'lam. I mentioned it case by case. If you see the person of taqwa and upon righteousness, then let them continue the rizq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you see somebody who is playing around, then you have to do inkar al-munkar. You have to at least tell them to stop. Allahu A'lam. Tell them. If they don't listen, that's not up to you. How exactly are fasting and taqwa related? Big time. The number one reason why we fast is to attain taqwa. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. Fasting is prescribed upon you, like it's been prescribed on the nations before you, so that you may attain taqwa. Tomorrow is Thursday. I'm aware of the prohibition of fasting the last 15 days, but I wasn't able to finish the fasting this Thursday as sunnah, especially after Siyam al-Bayl. If you started fasting on Siyam Ayyam al-Bayl, all right, and you didn't continue, if you started fasting Monday and your intention was to fast on Thursday, then inshallah that best, then it shouldn't be a problem. Broken from a wet dream after he come up to Fajr, or is the same rule applied like obligatory fast? A wet dream does not break your fast, my brothers and sisters. It does not. This is a consensus. Okay? Allahu A'lam. Whether it's sunnah or fard. Also have dental treatments while fasting. Like I said, the golden principle, anything that reaches past your nose, past your mouth, into your intestine, Allah says breaks your fast. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Is there a limit for when to start fasting the 6 days after Ramadan, or can we wait for winter and do it as soon as you're able to? Does a wet dream break a sunnah fast? No, a wet dream does not break your fast. Like a few minutes, if a woman gets her menses like a few minutes before Maghrib, does she have to make up the day? Yes, she does. طبعا there's khilaf in that, there's much khilaf in that. If a person misses suhoor or fajr due to sleep, does the sunnah fast still count? Yes, it does still count, but you're fasting and you missed fajr, that's unfortunate, you know. And fasting is prayer is greater than fasting. So work on your prayer game before you do sawm. So we can't fast if you sleep before Maghrib? No, we did not say that. You guys got to pay attention with open eyes and ears, and that was early in Islam. If you sleep after Maghrib, you're not allowed to break your iftar. If male initiated intercourse, do both partners make a fast or just the male? It depends. If the male initiated and the woman allowed it, she was consent with it, then obviously they both have to make a fast. Allahu A'lam. Maliki scholars, I can't say if all of the Maliki scholars, but it's the mu'tamad in the madhab. It is the official position of the madhab that whoever forgetfully eats, he breaks his fast. And Imam Ibn al-Arabi, rahimahullah, he strongly defends this position. Can we fast since we passed the 15th of Shaban? It is just like, according to the Shafi'is, they say you shouldn't fast. Wallahu A'lam, because of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, narrated by Al-Khamsa. He says, إِذَا انْتَصَبَ شَعْبَانَ فَلَا تَصُومُوا. If Sha'ban hits the 15th, then do not fast. There's a difference of opinion between scholars regarding the authenticity of this. Like we said, some scholars say it's authentic, and others they say it isn't. Same rule applied to the wife where she make it for the day, but she also need either of the three rulings. I did not understand that question. So can we continue to fast Monday and Thursday? I think that's a follow-up question. When expiating, does one have to fast 2 months consecutively? When expiating, yes, you have to do 2 months consecutively. You cannot miss a day. And does it have to be 60 days? No, it just has to be 2 months. And if these 2 months happen to be 29 days, and we say months, we're talking about Hijri months. If they have to be each 29 days, then that's 58 days, you're chilling. That's not a problem. It just has to be 2 months in a row. And if it's 60 days, it's 60 days. If it's 59, it's 59. Should Maghrib prayer should be given precedence over food, or should food be given precedence over prayer? We'll get to that, inshallah. But just to answer your question, the Prophet ﷺ, he clearly says to eat suhoor early. All right, eat suhoor early. So you should eat something at least before Maghrib. What is the most correct Shafi'i opinion about the prohibition of fasting in the last 15 days of Shaban? The most correct Shafi'i opinion is that it is not allowed. And some, they say it's disliked. To make up a fast of Ramadan. Yes, there's a time frame. The woman has up until the next Ramadan to make up her fasts. All right. Wallahu A'lam. And scholars, they say if she doesn't make it by next Ramadan, then she has to expiate. Wallahu A'lam. Well, they didn't make attention earlier before the prohibition of fasting. the last 15 days of Sha'ban. Like I said, whoever wants to fast from day on, there is an opinion out there that says you're allowed to. So if you go by that opinion, la ba's inshallah. But like I said, the Shafi'i school of thought says that it is not allowed. Is paying sadaqah the equal of slaughtering an animal? No. And a little gaffe I had earlier, and I said slaughtering an animal, scratch that. I meant freeing a slave. It was a slip of the tongue. Freeing a slave, not slaughtering an animal. Slaughtering animals, narration by Ata. Slaughtering a camel, that narration is weak. Or some of the scholars who say that hadith is valid. Some of the scholars that say the hadith is valid include Imam al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, rahimahullah ta'ala. And he was a Shafi'i, obviously. Initially he was a Hanbali, then he turned Shafi'i. Sahib al-Tarikh Baghdad, the one who wrote the famous book, magnum opus, in over 30 volumes, Tarikh Baghdad, the history of Baghdad. And he was nicknamed Hafid al-Mashriq. There's uncertainty about the end of a woman's menstruation period. Should she still fast? Depends on that uncertainty. That's a detailed question. A general question that requires a detailed answer. So it really depends on the uncertainty. Hey, that's a tough one. How does a woman expiate for not making up her missed days from the past Ramadan? How does a woman expiate for not making up her missed days? How does a woman expiate for not making up her missed days from the past Ramadan? Not sure what that implies. Person can make that clear, inshallah. We'll stop there, bi'idhnillah azza wa jal, and we'll continue. All right, as a matter of the person had intercourse intentionally or forgot about that she was fasting. That's a good question. All right. Does it matter if the person had intercourse intentionally or forgot about that she was fasting? All right. So if a person has intercourse unintentionally, does that break their fast, or does that require them to expiate? The scholars have differed regarding this. Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, all right, he says it's impossible for a person to have intercourse out of forgetfulness. It's impossible. And if it does happen, that's extremely rare. All right. If it doesn't happen, then it is extremely rare. And because of that, Imam Ahmad, he says that person has to make up that day and he has to expiate. All right. Imam Malik, rahimahullah, obviously he says, all right, he has to make up that day, but he doesn't have to expiate. And majority of the scholars, they say he doesn't have to expiate. Allahu a'lam. So if a person does intercourse unintentionally, then that person does not have to. That person does not have to unintentionally. Doesn't have to make up his fast. Neither does he have to continue. We'll stop there, bi'idhnillah azza wa jal, and continue our questions, if Allah permits, tomorrow, bi'idhnillah azza wa jal. Wa sallallahu wa sallam baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.